As a Sonic fan, there's a lot I can say about the franchise and its reputation. It's been such a roller coaster ever since I was growing up. And that saying is something because Sonic games have had more loops than the entire Sonic franchise combined. Even ever since I was a kid, I've watched this series crash and burn in ways only a hedgehog on a caffeine binge can manage. Sure, Sonic has been doing much better the past couple of years, and people are finally starting to give him the love he deserves. But I stopped to think, why is it only now that people are actually caring about Sonic? What went so wrong that they kept causing these crashes and mediocre slop? Now, don't get me wrong, I could go on and on forever about how Sega's marketing was like giving a megaphone to a mime, or how half the time Sega was just rushing deadlines. But there's one reason people seem to overlook. One reason I only really started thinking about whenever the Switch 2 was announced. And that reason is Nintendo. Now I could start this by talking about the success of the first movie that really started the uprise in Sonic's popularity during the 2020s. However, I think I'm just gonna go ahead and skip straight to the games, specifically Sonic Frontiers. When Sonic Frontiers was in development, Sonic Team didn't want another typical game like they usually have. They wanted something huge. Massive islands to explore, new enemies, animation breadth, and deep, open zones. Many sources have shown even hidden content that was taken away from the game, like unused animations, unused bosses, unused enemies, and especially the fact that we only had 3 main islands when we were supposed to have 5. I would like to point out that Kronos Island, Rhea Island, and Oranos Island are the exact same island, just split between 3 different parts of the story. But here's the real kicker. Early on in Sonic Frontiers development, they realized that the game wouldn't run on the Nintendo Switch. The hardware for the Nintendo Switch was simply not powerful enough to run what Sonic Team envisioned at the scale they wanted. This contributed to dumbed down graphics, pop-in, and smaller environments to get everything running smoothly. Fans still like to talk about how these technical limits and the necessity to make the game work on the Switch likely forced compromises on frame rates, enemy count, and even animations. So, right from the start, instead of an unleashed Sonic world, the game ended up handcuffed to a console that couldn't even show it off. It's a theme that we saw before, but it was never talked about. I'm sure you know the game. Sonic the Hedgehog 2006. A game that's as infamous in the community as that one friend who always breaks the save file. Originally, the plan was for the game to have all 3 big platforms at the same time. PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and the Wii. But the Wii simply couldn't run with the game engine needed. So, what happened? The development team got split. One half trying to build a game for the Wii, and the other half working on the main title. And then that Wii version got completely scrapped, and in its place was Sonic and the Secret Rings, an exclusive Nintendo console game that was pretty ass, which is now understandable for why Sonic and the Secret Rings and Sonic 06 were widely considered the worst games of the Sonic franchise, because they were originally supposed to be the same game. And the biggest blow? Yuji Naka, Sonic's co-creator, left right in the middle of all this chaos. The result was a rushed, unpolished game of glitches and awkward level design that became a poster child for everything Sega did wrong in that era. If Sonic Team had focused on one version with consistent leadership and more time to polish, instead of trying to bend the game around the Wii hardware, Sonic 06 might have actually been much better. And it didn't stop there. Almost every exclusive Sonic game in the late 2000s and early 2010s reads like a checklist for why things didn't land right. Take Sonic Boom, a reboot series on Wii U that was clunky, slow, full of glitches, guardrailed more than a highway construction site. Plenty of folks blame the Wii U's underpowered hardware, with the game feeling like it was tripping over its own ambition. Then there was Sonic Lost World, another Nintendo platform that didn't quite stick the landing in the eyes of many. It starts to feel like whenever Sonic had to bend himself around Nintendo's hardware limitations, the final product was weaker than it could have been. Even the handheld era had winners and losers. Sonic Rush Adventure, Sonic Rush, and the Sonic Colors DS port were really great, but those were more traditional 2D than what we have now is like modern Sonic, you know? And while Sonic Colors did have some genuinely fun mechanics, the series still struggled to find consistency. It's almost like Nintendo consoles were always treated as the first priority, but the hardware couldn't keep up with what Sonic wanted to be. As if Nintendo cares more about the money rather than making actual good consoles and knowing that their consumers are just going to buy any kind of slop they dish out. Now here's what's really interesting to me. The best Sonic games of the last era, the last generation, tend to be ones not weighed down by Nintendo's tech limit. Look at Sonic Generations, for example. Widely considered one of the best Sonic games of all time, where it did come to Nintendo platforms eventually, Sonic Team didn't have to build the game around weak hardware first. They poured effort into gameplay and design, and then Dimps handled the port separately on the DS, so the core experience stayed focused. The result? The fans love it, and still love it to this day. Even fan-led titles like Sonic Mania, built by passionate creators, rather than trying to accommodate the weakest system, and loved because they weren't forced to compromise just to run on every console. And after the Nintendo Switch got announced, you're telling me after all these years it finally happened? The Nintendo finally made a console, the Nintendo Switch 2, that at least does the bare minimum when it comes to graphics and frames? That Sonic finally doesn't have to dumb itself down just to squeeze onto the system? If that's true, and we're seeing games like Sonic Racing Cross World and Sonic X Shatter Generations support new hardware properly without awkward game key card nonsense, then maybe, just maybe, we're finally past the era where Sonic had to compromise just to make the cut on every Nintendo console. This isn't just hope. This is evidence of progress. Sonic has survived laughable crashes, the worst development cycles, and even unfinished, unpolished games to fill a museum of broken dreams. And yet, here we are, in an era where Sonic fans are actually excited again, where the community buzz is real, the fan base is expanding tremendously with the movies and the good games, and where Sonic isn't just surviving, he's thriving. So let this be a lesson to every fan out there. Never stop believing in the potential of something you love. Even when it stumbles, even when it bails on you with terrible frame rates and weird level design, the heart of Sonic, the heart of fun, is still alive. And if we keep running forward with hope, creativity, and passion, the best Sonic games of the future might be the ones we're only starting to imagine. Thanks for running through this with me, and remember, keep collecting those rings and never stop chasing the horizon. I'll see you guys in the next video.